Hello? Okay, so we are up to Tisborach Tzureinu Malachim V'Koleinu Borei Kedoshim. Now, the idea of Kedoshim, I think I mentioned last time we learned is that Kedoshim sometimes refers to the Malachim, and sometimes refers to Am Yisrael, and it can be used in both. And like I said last time, there's no specific kavanah to which we are bound by some sort of interpretation or some sort of commentary. Tefillah is made; it's avodah shebelev. It's made for us to express ourselves in and towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And the Anshe Knesset Gedolah, when they made the tefillos, they didn't mean to restrict us to a specific sentiment or a specific emotion or specific intellectual thought. They meant to give us a leeway to actually always have in mind different things at different times of need, at different times of emotion or feeling, in order that the tefillah should represent what we feel within our hearts. And that's why the aspect of tefillah, which is most remarkable, is how flexible it is, how much different content it can contain, and that the words are springboards for many, many different types of emotions. I think that is the idea of the Ruach HaKodesh, which you find in those things which are written in Ruach HaKodesh, is that not direct nevuah. Direct nevuah has a specific message. But things that are in Ruach HaKodesh are things which are supposed to give us a multi-layers of interpretation and multiple layers of understanding, and even layers of understanding which the original author didn't necessarily intend him or herself, but rather things which intentions which are included because when the work was written, it was written in an elevated frame of mind with divine inspiration, which gave the person who was writing it, the author, this tremendous capacity to include things above and beyond what he normally were able to perhaps even express himself. And this, by the way, is true about the Havdil, inspired works in other languages, which are also brilliant, brilliant works, such as, again, I'm saying Havdil, Shakespeare. People read Shakespeare can find infinite nuances of meaning and infinite, I should say infinite, but many, many inferences of meaning and many different connections, which Shakespeare himself clearly did not have in mind. But it's an inspired piece of literature, and therefore it can be used to express and to convey all sorts of emotions, all sorts of perceptions, all sorts of understandings, all sorts of connections. So alachas kama v'kama is something which is written not just with generic inspiration, but just when Ruach HaKodesh is meant to be able to allow us to express ourselves in ways which are, and to understand connections in ways which are way above and beyond any specific meaning which the author had at the time. Okay, so that's again the word Kedoshim. When we use the Shemana here, Kedoshim Chasela. There too, it can mean Malachim, it can mean Am Yisrael, and you could have a kavanah one tefillah one way, another tefillah another way, depending on how the mood strikes you at the moment. Okay, so here too, Tisborach Tzureinu Malachim V'Koleinu Borei Kedoshim. So the first part is clearly talking about us directly. We're saying HaKadosh Baruch Hu is Tzureinu Malachim V'Koleinu. We're talking about us personally. Now the word Tzur is a very fascinating word. And I'm not sure we had it previously. You can let me know if I'm repeating myself. The word tzur has two basic meanings in our tefillos. And again, we've been out of the meanings. But tzur means a rock, like a ma'od tzuri yeshuasi, and also means an artist, like a sayar. And the word tsar, it comes is the same word as the word narrow, right? World is a very narrow bridge. So the word tsar means to shape something, and because when you shape something, you narrow it and you make all sorts of various different narrow and wider parts to it. So that is why when you're mitzayer something, also I should start with the yotzer. A yotzer is a potter, right? He shapes and forms the clay. A tzayar is an artist. A tzayar also, he shapes and forms the way in which he puts the ink on the canvas, right? The tzur is the shaped rock, which results from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's being mitzayer thing. So a tzur is not just an evan, a stone. It's something which is kind of like a fortification, a source of strength and power. So we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu's Tzureinu, it has both meanings. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is our source of strength, and also he is the one who designed us and destined us for the purpose for which he created in this world. As a result, he's Malkeinu, right? Because since he is the one who designed us and the one in which we find security, in which we find also to which we can trust, so therefore he is clearly, logic dictates that he's our Melech, he's our king, and of course, Go'aleinu. Ultimately, the Geula has to come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, right? Because obviously, if he had a plan for the world, he designed it. He's Mitzayer it. He's Melech over it. He rules over it. It must be that eventually there's going to be a Geula, which is going to bring about the ultimate fruition, the ultimate purpose of the world. I'm going to go off on a tangent here for a minute. That Chaim Kanievsky, who was buried today, Zichron Tzadik V'Kodesh Livracha. There are many people who thought that Reb Chaim was going to be around to greet the Mashiach because they couldn't imagine any continuity for Am Yisrael, any great Sar HaTorah, which is going to be on Reb Chaim's level after Reb Chaim would be Nifter. Of course, that's not true. Of course, the HaKadosh Baruch Hu always provides Am Yisrael with great Talmidei Chachamim and great Tzaddikim. So we just don't necessarily know who they are until they are recognized. But that doesn't mean that there aren't other ones, and many other ones, perhaps even, who are part and parcel of the plan of HaKadosh Baruch Hu to keep Am Yisrael going. The Chazal say that there are 36 hidden tzaddikim. So if even we don't have revealed tzaddikim in a generation, obviously there are always tzaddikim which are there who are able to sustain us and are supposed to keep Am Yisrael having enough schuyos to eventually come to have the Geula Shlema. Okay, so that is again, this is a sequence. This is Tzureinu, therefore Malkeinu, therefore Go'aleinu, Borei Kedoshim, who created Kedoshim. Now here, too, like I said, it can mean either one. Can mean Kedoshim, like he says here, the Eitz Yosef Elu Malachim, but it also can mean, and he says I think also the same thing here. Oh, he doesn't speak about this. No, he doesn't speak about Kedoshim are. Okay, but so the idea is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created Kedoshim, who are either Malachim or Bnei Yisrael. And what is the point? What do Kedoshim do? What is the concept of Kedoshim? So the concept of Kadosh, Shimon Shkop in his Akdama Deshar Yosha, which is the greatest masterpiece of Jewish thought in my mind, written in the past 500 years. And if you haven't learned it yet, it's something which you should definitely do to learn. You can find the translation in English, which I'm happy to provide you with. I have so a friend of mine translated it. He wrote a whole book on the basis of it called "Widen Your Tent." But that the Reb Shimon Shkop talks about the purpose of the Bria and the purpose of every Jewish person. And he says that there is a pasuk which we say in a couple of parashas coming up, Kedoshim Tiyuki Kadosh Ani Hashem Elokecha. And I'm not going to go into the detail right now. But basically, he argues that the Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and our Kedusha has to be similar, because it says there, Kedoshim Tiyuki Kadosh Ani Hashem Elokecha. If I be Kadosh like I'm Kadosh. And we know Rashi says there that Kedusha means to be Prushim in Arayas, to separate yourself from inappropriate behaviors. And Ramban says not to be a novel b'shus HaTorah, not to be a glutton or a drunk or a person who has many wives and so on and so forth. You have to not be a novel. Don't be a coarse person, even though you're doing it black kosher in a way which is theoretically halachically permissible. It's not appropriate to be. But Shimon says those shatim are nice and they're certainly true, but they don't. That's the kedusha we're talking about. That kind of kedusha is not relevant to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu's kedusha is such that it clearly has nothing to do with arayas. It clearly has nothing to do with eating and drinking. So he says the kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu it means the purpose for which Hakadosh Baruch Hu designated himself when he created the Bria. And that is the idea of something which is hekdesh. Something which is hekdesh is devoted and designated for a purpose. Usually it's a higher purpose, right? Hekdesh is something which has what we call kedusha, but there can be the opposite as well. The verb kuf dalet shin is kind of neutral because we find in the Torah that there's a kadesh and a kadesha. Some person who is designated for the purpose of nus. So obviously the word kadesh means to devote and to designate, and normally we assume means devoted, designated positively, but it also means devoted and designated in a negative way. So therefore, the purpose about Kadosh Baruch Hu, when he created the Bria, he devoted and designated himself to be native, to do what is good, and we don't always understand how, of course, but do what is good ultimately for the all of creation, for everything it created, and especially for humanity, and especially for Am Yisrael. So too, how are we Kedoshim? We're Kedoshim also if we devote ourselves to be like HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to benefit Am Yisrael, to benefit the world in general, but specifically to benefit Am Yisrael, and devote ourselves as much as possible to being native to others. And Rabbi Shimon has much more to say there, very beautiful, which I'm not going to get into right now. But the idea is that Kedusha means to be focused on doing that which is going to bring the best possible results to this universe that is possible. So Kadosh Baruch Hu, he's Kadosh in and of himself. HaKadosh Baruch Hu. By the way, it's an interesting thing we learn that we say Kol HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but really it's clear from Yerushalmi that the name is really HaKadosh. But just like we say Hashem Yisborach, we say HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So it's really not HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So the term is HaKadosh. Hashem is defined as the Holy One. When we say Holy One, blessed be He, but He's the Holy One. So Holy One in this case means that He was devoted and designated himself for the purpose of being native with the Bria from the beginning. Okay, so so as I say, Borei Kedoshim, He created the Kedoshim, which again are either Malachim or Bnei Adam. Yishtabach Shimcha La'ad Malkeinu. So Kadosh Baruch, we want Kadosh Baruch's name should be praised. Yotzei Meshorsim, who created Meshorsim. Now, the indication, and here it's talking about Malachim, although again, it's not necessarily so, is that it's talking about the Meshorsim, the servants of Kadosh Baruch Hu. And Meshorsim, we understand to mean the things in the heavens, which is the purpose of this bracha, right? Yotzer HaMoros. And these Meshorsim are both things we can see, the sun and the moon, and so on and so forth, and things we can't see, which are the Malachim. And according to the Kabbalah, every Malach is associated with a physical object, which is a fascinating idea. And Rabbi Kaplan has a beautiful explanation of this. He says, you need to have a way to differentiate spiritual things. Human beings are differentiated by space, by material. There are dimensions by which you can distinguish one person from another person, one thing from another thing. But how do you distinguish something spiritual from something spiritual? They have no dimensions, no proportions, distinguishing them. So the way to distinguish them is by, one of the ways to distinguish them is by associating them with a physical object. So even though they're not physical, the association of the physical object is something which gives them a definition. This is the malach of body A as opposed to the malach of body B. So then there's the differentiation. You can see the difference between them. Another way would be to actually give them names, right? Which some malachim have names. Most malachim we know don't have names. Only malachim who have permanent missions have names. Most malachim, they don't have permanent names. But if the permanent name, obviously the malach differentiates the Malach Michael from the Malach Gabriel, and so on and so forth. But so there's the interconnection between the heavenly spheres, all the objects in Shemayim, and all the objects on earth for that matter. Chazal say, she'ein mazel omer elam umakeu moler gadal. The word used is mazel, but people understand to be interchangeable with the word malach. It's every blade of grass has an angel which stands over it and hits it and tells it to grow. So there's angel of grass blade A, of grass blade B, of grass blade grass blade 600,655,229. But everything which has a force to it, and even inanimate objects, for that matter, that's what we find in by Yaakov Avinu, when the stones were arguing with each other, Alai Tzadik Rosho. So the understanding is that there's a certain spirituality even in a diamond, even in a stone, and that's the, so to speak, the malach of that stone, because the malach is just a term which used for a spiritual force, and therefore all the spiritual forces gravitated to that huge magnet, which is Yaakov Avinu, and said Alai Tzadik Rosho. So when we talk about the Meshorsim of Hashem, we talk interchangeably about the physical Meshorsim and the spiritual Meshorsim, and we assume that every physical Meshores of Hashem has, again, the angelic force which is behind it, which gives it its chius, it gives it its purpose and its direction and its function. So there's an obvious question, which bothered me for many years, and which is why did Hashem have to create angels? You know, if you learn Kabbalah, there are gazillions and gazillions of angels out there. Why bother? What's the point of angels? Can't see them, can interact with them for the most part, except for the very the permanent ones. Why is there so many malachim? So there are many answers to that. But one of the answers, one of the simple answers, is not something which is beyond us, but we can understand, is that if you have the capacity to know which malach is in charge of which force, you can actually manipulate that malach. That's something which we don't do, and it's also very dangerous, because if you don't know what you're doing, the Sfarim say you can get yourself into big trouble. But the idea of malachim is, we can understand, a tzaddik can use shemos of malachim to accomplish great things in this world. The other thing is that it gives you, if everything was abstract, there'd be no way of understanding cause and effect. So again, much more pragmatically, a much more simple level, if you understand, oh, this model is in charge of that, and that model is in charge of that, I can understand how the mechanism works. It's kind of like understanding the computer program, how the computer program works. But the Nefesh HaChaim and others, Tanya and others, they all say another idea, which again is based on these two, but is more understandable, which is that every mitzvah I do creates a spiritual force for good in the world. Every aveira I do creates a spiritual force for bad in the world. A spiritual force is called a malach, because a malach is an messenger, an agent. This spiritual force, some of them come from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and some of them come from us. We create malachim. And so again, it's a way for us to put a tangible term to a spiritual force which we create or influence in a positive way or in a negative way. So they're not just Meshorsim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. They're also Meshorsim of ours. That's not the emphasis here, but the emphasis here is clearly on the Malachim in Shamayim, but and how they're Meshorsim Hashem, but there also are Meshorsim as well. That's why Chazal say that Ad Marishon, before the Chet, Malachi Asharis would roast for him meat and pour for him wine. They were the Meshorsim of Ad Marishon. Because there's even a halacha which we don't do anymore, because it would be utter gaiva, which says that when you go into the bathroom, you're supposed to say, it's the brother of Shor, you're supposed to say to Malachim who are accompanying you, excuse me, I'm a human being and I now have to go attend to my needs. Can you please wait till I come out of the bathroom and I'll come back to you? So according to this Gemara and according to this halacha, every human being has Meshorsim or Malachim. When Chazal says that the reason why clothes wear out is because there's so many Malachim rubbing against us all the time. I don't think that can be taken on a simple level, but there is such a Chazal. So there also are Meshorsim, but you were saying about Hashem Meshorsav. right? The Meshorsim for us and for Hashem, but Meshorsim. Kulam Omdim Brum Olam, they all stand at the top of the world. So here, the interesting Eitz Yosef here. Eitz Yosef says, Yotze Meshorsim Amar Loshen Hoveh. It says it in the current present tense. Shua Yotze Tamid Chol Yom. Hashem creates these every day. V'yisa b'chagiga Perak Ein Dorshim. Kol Yoma Mivru Malachim in Nahar Dinur. Every day Malach created from the river of fire. V'amrei Shira, and they sing praise to Kedosh Baruch Hu. Uvasle, and they melt, they dissolve, they go back into the river. The river of fire. Kedoshim and Meshorsim, new every for the mornings. It makes them new every morning. And then they dissolve or melt because of the fear of the perception of Kedosh Baruch Hu which they perceive. He's not confident in his Malachim. Because they're at the top of the world. We saw folks and they faint me say, and from the fear of Hashem, so to speak, sitting on his throat. And they are negated from their fear, it's better, strong word than fear. I'm not thinking about right now. Perushin is a way to understand it. Before we go on, Malachim and Har Dinur. Again, HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't need these Malachim who are rising up from the fires of this fiery river and saying praise, and then falling back again down to the river and being negated, and then rising up again the next day. It's a mashal. The mashal is that every day there are new kochos in the world, which are the kochos of that day, and no day is similar. Every day is a different day, and every day is different hashpos. There hasn't been any day since the beginning of time which is exactly like any other day. There are days which resemble each other. Every Pesach resembles every other Pesach, but they're not precisely the same. So therefore, every day there are new malachim, kavyochel, who come up, and they're the malachim of that day, and they praise the Kodesh Baruch Hu for that day, and they fulfill their task for that day, and then they go back to the general flow of time, which is the Nahar Dinur, the river of fire, the flow of time as it goes on and on. It's not that the malachim are lost, but they serve their purpose, and now they've enriched the flow of time, and they go back to it. So that's the fiery river which they return. Every day with its own hashpach. Kedoshim and Meshorsim. Every morning a new thing. Okay, so they says Yotzer Meshorsim, Yotzer Meshorsim, Osam Mischachim B'chol Yom, those which are new every day. V'Hashem Meshorsim Me'olam K'mo Michal v'Gavriel. So he wants to say that the Meshorsim every day, which are the generic ones, and then the Meshorsim, which are the named ones, which are permanent. Michal and Gavriel. Kulam Omdim Brum Olam Mashmim B'Yur. So all of them, all the malachim of all kinds, they stand at the top of the world, and they cause to be heard with all Yacha B'Kol, together with a voice. Divrei Elokim Chaim U'Melech Olam. The words, that was Divrei Elokim Chaim can be read two ways. I'm sure you realize that. Divrei Elokim Chaim can mean the words of the living God, or it can be the living words of God. It's probably the second one, words of the living God. But again, you're not compelled to do it to understand it one way or the other. So he says over here, let's see how it explains. The It says that they have yira. The fear and the trepidation fall also on Michal and Gavriel. Even though they're great malachim, they're there constantly, they're also still afraid. Shemi Tisborach Midas Basar V'Dam. The Kodesh Baruch Hu's trait is not a trait of human being. Midas Basar V'Dam, by human being. Mishim Miskayvel of Yoser, the closer you get, to be from the members of the inner circle. Mismaid Maro, they become less afraid. At first you're afraid of your teacher, you're afraid of your principal, but as you get older and more and further into the year or further into the school, you're less afraid. You got used to them. Shem's not like that. The closer you get, the more afraid they are. Like the pasuk says, the Norah Kosiyov, he's awesome on those who are closest to him. There's governance and fear with him. And the more Hashem gives authority to one of his officials, not if you give authority to an official, he feels independent. He feels he has his own sense of power. He feels a less awe of the person who delegated him the power, but he says no, on the contrary. He says that he feels more of a sense of awe and power. He gives governance and fear together. Commotion, when you set a python, like we say in the side of Tokef, Malachim yechavezun, the Malachim make haste, the Chilur yochez in their seas with trembling, Miras Romus Tisborach, from the fear of the loftiness of a Kosh Baruch. Kimakirim Erka, Lefon of Tisborach Shukain. They recognize that they are as if nothing relative to Kosh Baruch. So this is, of course, Malachim are able to have this because they don't live in the Tzimtzum. They're not, Hashem is not concealed from them. So they have much more powerful yira than a human being can ever have. But the idea is, again, what you're saying is that they are all, no matter how high they are, relative to Kodesh Baruch Hu, they're nothing. So therefore, there's no such thing as someone who's less afraid, so to speak, about Kodesh Baruch Hu. On the contrary, the closer you are, the more you have a perception of Kodesh Baruch Hu, the more afraid you're going to be. So they all the Malachim together have this yira, and they all are mashmiya yira yachad. No matter how great the Malach is, how minor the Malach is, they all mashmiya kol divrei Elokim chayim melchom. I once read a funny short story in English, not from a Jewish source. It said somebody did a favor for an angel. Actually, they called it was a god in the story. So it was the god of the god of $3.98. This god had powers up to $3.98. $3.99, he didn't have any power anymore. So the $3.98, he had great power. So this human being did this god, again, for our purposes, an angel is a better term, a favor, and saved him in some way, shape, or form. So then the god says, whenever I'll look out for you. Anything up to $3.98, I will make sure that it'll go well for you. So the guy figures, what is going to do me $3.98? So one day he's in a terrible automobile accident and he almost dies. And miraculously he survives. So a note comes down from Shamayim and says, it's a newspaper clipping. The newspaper clipping says, the value of the chemicals in the human body is $3.98. So the God of $3.98 saved this person because that's the value of his body. So what's going on here? Sorry, so this was for a second. Yeah, I got this. Okay, so the must be some sim from Shemayim. So the idea is that even a small malach has a tremendous amount of power, but of course the malachim also have gradations, and but all of them, when it comes to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, they're like nothing. So they all have the same, and the kol it says here about in the bottom also. Again, despite the different levels, no one is earlier, no one's later. Everybody has the same recognition at once. And divrei, so he says here several interpretations here. Divrei, they relate that one of the jobs of Malachim is to pronounce the Gzeros of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the decrees of Hashem, the Chesh V'Chav Divrei Love, and so to his praises and those things which are again hallowed. We spoke about the past is a different form of Shevach. Elokim Chayim U'Melech Olam. Hashem Shu Elokim Chayim U'Melech Olam. So the way he's learning it is indeed Divrei Elokim Chayim, the words of the living God. I don't think I like better the other chat. The Vorim Chaim of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. No, it's all Torah's Chaim, Divrei Chaim. Everything Kadosh Baruch Hu says gives life in this world. So I prefer, again, one can say it either way. He's saying Divrei Chaim means the word of the living God. I think it's me makes more sense the living words of God. You can have in mind whichever you want. But so the Malachim, they're supposed to bring Ratzon Hashem into the Bria. Divrei Elokim Chaim U'Melech Olam. They bring the Ratzon Hashem into fruition, whether we can see it or not. Obviously, it says by Shlomo HaMelech, right? He understood Sichas Kolim, Sichas Shedim, Sichas Malachim. He understood all these things, all the languages. What do all these languages mean? Palm trees don't speak to each other, but the plants don't speak to each other. But the way they represent Ratzon Hashem in this world. So, and remember, we said every plant, every spirit, everything which has a life force has a malach, which is so to speak in charge of it. So the malachim bring the HaKadosh Baruch Hu's decrees down to the world, and in turn, of course, they're also mishabeach HaKadosh Baruch Hu for the things which they do on his behalf. So the we're going to see in the next paragraph, there are certain malachim who are called ofanim. As you might know, the Hebrew word for bicycle is ofnaim. Ofnaim has two ofanim, has two wheels. So they're wheel malachim. What does it mean, a malach, which is a wheel? The wheel goes around and around, right? So it brings down influence, and it brings up the Torah, mitzvahs, the tefillos of Am Yisrael. And then it brings down again the influence which comes as a result. And it brings up again the Torah, mitzvahs, tefillos, and it's constantly going round and round and round. So the Malachim have this task of being mashmiya divrei Elokim Chaim u'Melech. Now here it says u'Melech Olam, and you see the Anaf Yosef. We say that, that's the way we say it. He brings up Anaf Yosef Kosim Ma'aramzal she'ein lomar u'Melech Olam. Makes no sense, right? Say divrei Elokim Chaim Melech Olam. What does it mean u'Melech Olam? Right? It looks like they're two gods. There's Elokim and there's Melech Olam. Avagam Maral. I'm not sure what this next word is Maral is something or other. Anyway, Omer Shetzorech Lomar Melech. Shepasuk Malay. You still have to say. You do have to say Melech, despite the fact that it's a dangerous thing to say, because it's a pasuk. The pasuk is. Let's go on here. I have to quote the pasuk in the area. So I guess he says that that's the Lashon pasuk. That's what we say, even though it has this danger of sounding like there's a Elokim Melech Olam, but obviously we're saying that the words of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who's the Baal Kochos, right? Elokim means the master of all forces, who is the Melech Olam, who is also the king of the world. Okay, so and we say Kulam Ahuvim, Kulam Berurim, Kulam Giborim, Kulam Osim Bein Moav Yira Ritzon Konam. Right, so the beautiful thing to say. He says down here, it says Kulam Ahu in the front of his bark, Bavim Zel Lazeh, Shem Bem Kina Sina V'Tachrus. It says on Yom Kippur we're like Malachim. And what's the definition of Malachim? This is the definition. There's no jealousy among them, no hatred, and no competition. Everybody knows their place and their job and their mission, and they're not jealous of anybody's place, job, or mission. Those who have great missions have those great missions. Those who have minor missions, but they're all important. There's no, the most important person in the army is not the general. The most important person in the army is the private, because the general doesn't fight; he sits back and plans. The private's the one to go out to war. So everybody has a mission. Everybody's supposed to fulfill their mission. And everybody, of course, Malachim don't anticipate reward for their mission. They just do their mission. But for us, obviously, we're rewarded for our missions, and we're supposed to not be jealous of anybody else's missions. It's a very hard meter to have, obviously, because we die for it every day. Nafshika kol. We should be, but that's the idea that ultimately nobody should be jealous of anybody else. Everybody should love everybody else and not have any competition with anybody else. Kulam Brim, because she says Kashemesh, Shema and Yetzirah. That our material existence is what muddies us, makes us, not clear, not clarified. But they are just, because they have no material existence. They have pure hearts and pure and transcendent minds. In other words, there's no none of the things which make human beings malfunction or dysfunctional exist by Malachim, which of course is a beautiful thing, even though it's way above our capacity to understand. So he said, there's a nice shot here. Now, before I think we'll stop with this. He says, Tefillah says, going back to Kedoshim and Meshorsim, he says, the two types of spiritual entities. Echad, kitos nidolim shuleha gufos, separate groups which have no body, zakim, pure, mulim, uplifted, Tisborach, which are close to the Shekhinah, upon which the Shekhinah is constantly present. Galgal. According to Levitt, they're called the Galgal, the sphere around Hashem, the Galgal, again, a wheel around Hashem, and they are called also Okisei or Ofan. Remember that they're connected to the Kisei of Hashem and the Ofan and the wheels around Hashem. Okay, so come back to this. He says Malachim. They're created by Hashem to do his agency. And they, as we know, sometimes come down here below, as we find by the Malachim who came down to Avraham Avinu, etc. Let's say perhaps the first is called Barei Kedoshim, because they never come down to this world, they're completely separate. Because they come down to this world and they serve Hashem here, serve us as well. Okay, well, we'll get more into that as we get more into this tefillah and the various different types of malachim. Okay, Shkoyach, thank you very much. Have a good week.
Thank you.